when I think about our next speaker, I guess it just fortifies us on the need to protect secularism everywhere. Taslima Nasrin last spoke to our conference in 2002 in San Diego. She accepted a Free Thought Heroine Award. And Dan and I have had the pleasure of running into her at some international conferences, a couple lovely events in Dublin and in Cologne, Germany. And I remember her telling us in Cologne, Germany, that she is a woman without a country, and that freethinkers are her country. And she is today third on a hit list, the hit list concocted by the Bangladesh religious terrorists who so far this year have hacked to death with machetes 4 Bangladesh atheist writers and bloggers on the streets of Bangladesh. It started in April and it's continued. And now they say they're going to go after the Bangladesh writers who have escaped. And they put Taslima number 3 on that list. And she had been living in India. It has become increasingly dangerous there, and so the Freedom from Religion Foundation and Center for Inquiry helped Taslima leave India, at least temporarily, while she tries to figure out what to do. And she's back in the United States right now. And she began writing poetry at the age of 13 in Bangladesh, and she earned a medical degree in 1984, and she worked in public hospitals for 8 years, where she saw what the plight of women and the lack of reproductive rights and other discrimination against women in her country, and began to write about that in newspaper columns. And she also had her poetry published and increasingly criticized religion and its treatment of women. And Islamic fundamentalists began staging street demonstrations against her as early as 1990. And then she wrote a novel called Shame, and it was about the mistreatment of Hindus by the Muslims in Bangladesh. And some imams decided to pronounce a death fatwa against her, and the streets were alive with demonstrations, and she had to go into hiding in Bangladesh, and a great deal of negotiations about how she would get out alive. And she fled, I think it was 93, she'll have to tell us, to Sweden for asylum. And first they banned her book, and then they put a bounty on her head. And that reminds me of the Voltaire quote, people who will burn books will burn people. She lived in exile in Europe for many years, and then she settled, as I said, in India, closer to home. And she wants to be close to home. Why wouldn't she? Until these escalating threats, constant threats, and death threats, and the I guess it's ISIL is now in Bangladesh. Taslima began to question the Muslim faith as a child after reading numerous misogynist passages in the Quran. When she studied other religions, she found they too oppressed women. And through all of this, and imagine what her life has been like, she has managed to write more than 30 books of poetry, novels, essays, and short stories in Bengali, and many of them have been translated, and we are lucky today that we have her book, Revenge, that she will sign after the conclusion of the program tonight. And we are also so very glad to have Taslima Nasrin here tonight, safe, and to receive the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Emperor Has No Clothes Award, reserved for public figures who tell it like it is about religion and make known their dissent. And this is our emperor. Many of you have met him before, made for us by the company that does the Oscars. And Taslima, are you here? Where is Taslima? There she is.
Good evening. I'm grateful to the Freedom from Religion Foundation for giving me the award, The Emperor Has No Clothes. I'm also grateful to Annie Laurie for having previously selected me for the Free Thought Heroine Award in 2002, and for a grant more recently. This organization has been standing by me during my trials and tribulations. A few days ago, the Bangladeshi jihadist group Ansarullah Bangla team published what it called a global hit list of writers and bloggers who have denigrated Islam, and promised to take action against such writers. I am on the list. At the bottom of the list, the terrorist group Ansarullah has issued the following chilling threat. I quote, "Enemies of Islam and madrasa education, atheists, anti-Islam apostates, bloggers, are trying to set obstacles in the path of establishment of Islamic Caliphate. We demand that the Bangladesh government cancel the citizenship of such enemies of Islam. Otherwise, we will kill them wherever we find them across the world. Our jihad will continue, inshallah. Amen. Ansarullah Bangla team." Unquote. There have been reports in the media recently that Ansarullah activists are trying to cross over from Bangladesh to India to kill me. Ansarullah believes in the ideology of Anwar al-Awlaki, a Yemen-based Al-Qaeda activist, and has been involved in the brutal murders of several Bangladeshi freethinkers and bloggers. It is a matter of pride to be freethinker, atheist, and blogger in a civilized society, as the rights of such people are respected. However, in a country like Bangladesh, where society is still in its primitive and brutal state, such intellectuals are killed for being progressive and speaking their minds. Such societies silence the voices of atheists and humanists who try to wake people to a new dawn. Atheism became such a hated word that everybody in Bangladesh chooses to maintain a safe distance from atheists, even though the government is bound by its own policy to not differentiate between citizens on the basis of their beliefs. Sadly, in order to safeguard its own interest, the government has turned its back on rationalists, secularists, atheists, and humanists who need its support the most. There has always been a conflict between religion and science, and every time science emerges as the winner, as science doesn't base itself on faith but on fact, it supports what is tested and is true, and truth cannot be hidden by lies for a very long time. To abolish all kinds of hypocrisy from my country, we need more atheists to speak the truth. Bangladesh was earlier known to the world because of the annual floods that devastated the population. From a country that suffered from natural calamities, it is now emerging as a nation that suffers from man-made catastrophes, remorselessly butchering atheists and bloggers. Unless politicians stop the business of using religion to get votes from ignorant people, many enlightened writers will bleed to death in the country. 4 bloggers were hacked to death this year. Among them, Niloy Neal, the secular humanist blogger, was a member of the Taslima Nasrin supporters group. He was brutally killed by Islamic terrorists only because he was an enlightened critic of Islam. Niloy Neal criticized all religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. But he was killed only for criticizing Islam. Like others, he had to die for his crime of being a free thinker. A few days ago, Islamic State or ISIS claimed responsibility for the killing of an Italian man and a Japanese man in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. It's alarming that once a secular country, Bangladesh, is quickly becoming a land of Islamists. When I oppose Islamists for their heinous crimes against humanity, I'm called an Islamophobe. Islamophobia is a word coined by fundamentalists. If you criticize Islam, you will be called an Islamophobe. It's a political tactic to stop criticism of Islam. It's as if you are free to criticize all religions but not Islam, even if there are widespread killings and oppression of women in the name of this religion. I don't criticize Islam only. I criticize and speak up against anti-human elements in all religions, but I criticize Islam more because I have grown up in a Muslim country and I witnessed the violation of human rights, women's rights under Islam. Is there any other writer in the world whose 5 books are banned, TV serials are banned, and who has been banned from entering her own country for more than 2 decades, and also banned from entering a state where people have the same language and culture? It is unfortunately me. In 1993, when my books made Islamic fundamentalists angry, there were widespread protests in Bangladesh. Huge rallies were organized against me. Fatwa was issued and a price was put on my head. Eventually, I was banished from my own country. Needless to say, the concept of freedom of speech was violated in all possible ways at that time. Some authors stopped writing books criticizing religion because they did not want to face what was inflicted on me. Therefore, we can say that self-censorship became a norm right from that time. The culture of opposing freedom of speech or creative independence did not grow overnight in the country. I would say Islamization started right from the mid-70s in Bangladesh. Our secular constitution was changed. A lot of foreign funds from rich Muslim countries came into our country to radicalize our schools and our education system. In fact, a section of our youth has been indoctrinated to turn into Islamists. Into Islam, and they are killing in the name of Islam. The government did nothing about it because it needed to appease religionists to stay in power. The government is not keen on protecting talented rationalists and secular bloggers and writers. The authorities are asking free-thinking intellectuals to stop hurting religious sentiments when they should be telling perpetrators that strong punishment would be given to people hacking bloggers to death. How can creativity prosper in such an atmosphere? We saw that in Mecca, about 1,300 people were killed in a stampede during Hajj. We saw how Saudi officials were bulldozing bodies of dead Hajj pilgrims like garbage and dumping them into a pile. And to my surprise, Saudi Arabia, the world's most brutally repressive regime, was chosen to head an United Nations Human Rights Council panel. After Hajj massacre, I could not prevent myself from saying, Muslims believe they will go to heaven if they die during Hajj. The families of those pilgrims are so happy because they died during Hajj. I said, think twice before going to Hajj. You can be killed in a stampede. You won't be sent to heaven if you die in Mecca, because there is no heaven. Throwing stones at Satan, kissing a black stone, believing it absorbs sins, all these childish things performed by adults. Grow up, people. Religion is a profitable business. You do not need to invest anything but ignorance. Rituals which were okay in 7th century's Mecca are now outdated. These rituals are not okay for a huge crowd in the 21st century. Stop Hajj. Some people in Bangladesh were arrested under the 57 ICT Act for criticizing Saudi Arabia for not providing enough security to pilgrims. You see, Saudi Arabia, however much crimes it commits, must not be criticized. It is the country where Prophet was born. In the meantime, a Muslim man was killed by Hindu fanatics in India for eating beef. And an Indian Muslim man killed his 6-year-old daughter for not covering her head or for not wearing veil during her dinner at home. We witness every day how religion makes people cruel and inhuman. You may know that by supporting women's rights everywhere, I have criticized all kinds of religions, traditions, cultures, and customs. To Muslims, I am labeled as being anti-Islam. This has led to some people saying that I am a Muslim hater. But they are wrong. By no means am I a Muslim hater. I always stand by oppressed people. I stood by Muslims when they were oppressed in Gujarat, in India, in Palestine, and in Bosnia. I defended their rights to live, just as I stood by the Hindus who are oppressed in Bangladesh and by the Christians in Pakistan. To me, their religious identity is not important. Human beings believe in religion, or they do not. Nobody should be oppressed because of her or his belief. I have always stood for this. The criticism I make of the religion I do by writing. I do not go to harm the believers physically with a sword. I do not believe in violence. The fanatics never accept the idea to have a dialogue or debate with me or write articles or books opposing me. They come to kill me, for they are convinced by their belief in their religion that an apostate must be killed. Some people still like to believe that Islam is a religion of peace, but since my childhood, I have witnessed the opposite. I believe no country becomes became civilized without criticizing the dogmatic practices of its religions. Without separating state and religion, no state or society become modern. Should Islam continue to be untouchable? Many Western intellectuals who are enjoying the benefits of secularism in their own country refuse to criticize Islamic oppression of women for fear it might hurt the religious sentiments of Muslims. But I ask, should it remain how it is? And should women continue to suffer? Without criticism of Islam, it would never be possible for Islamic countries to separate state and religion, never possible to have a secular education instead of a Quranic education. And if such didn't happen, Islamic societies would remain in darkness forever. Women would not enjoy the right to live as human beings. As a child, I was forced to read verses in the Quran, but I could not understand the meaning of the verses that I read. Like other children, I was just parroting words. Our language is Bengali, not Arabic. It was impossible to know the meaning of the verses, for no matter how many times I repeated and memorized them, I had no way of knowing what I was saying. I was told that Allah wanted the Quran to be read in its original language, but this made me all the more curious to know the meaning of the verses. One day I discovered a book that translated the Quran. I read it for the first time, the whole holy book, and guess what? I became an atheist. I did not need to read any book on atheism or secularism or humanism to be an atheist. I still believe that for the Muslims, the Quran is the best book that can inspire them to becoming an atheist. As I grew up, I realized that, like other religions, Islam is not compatible with human rights, women's rights, freedom of expression, and democracy. There is no way in a real democracy that separation of religion and state can be neglected. There is no way we can have women's rights if we have religious law. There is no way we can enjoy human rights if we allow religious rules to regulate society. Free speech must include the right to be different, to offend, as well as to praise. A fact most of the people in many countries do not know and do not believe. Without the right to offend, freedom of expression cannot exist, and without freedom of expression, democracy will not work. Islam doesn't consider women to be a separate human being. Man is the original creation, and womankind is created secondarily for the pleasure of man. Islam considers a woman as a slave or sexual object, nothing more. Women's role is to stay at home and to obey her husband. Women are considered weak, so they should be taken care of. Their body and mind, their desire and wishes, their rights and freedom must be controlled by men. Islam treats women as intellectual, moral, and physical inferiors. In marriage, Islam protects the rights of men and men only. Once the marriage is consummated, women have no rights whatsoever in this field. The Quran gives total freedom to men, saying, "Your women are as your field, go unto them as you will." Women are told to run to their husbands wherever they are. Whatever they do, it is their duty. The hadith says that two prayers that never reach the heavens are, number one, those of the escaping slaves, and number two, those of the reluctant women who frustrate their husbands at night. Islam considers women psychologically inferior. A woman's testimony is not allowed in cases of marriage and divorce and child custody. If any woman is raped, she has to produce 4 male witnesses to the court. If she can't, there is no charge against the rapist. In Islamic law, the testimony of 2 women is worth that of 1 man. In the case in which a man suspects his wife of adultery or denies the legitimacy of the offspring, his testimony is worth that of 4 witnesses. A woman does not have the right to charge her husband in a similar manner. Women are not allowed to inherit the property on equal terms with their brothers. In the case of inheritance, Allah says, a male shall inherit twice as much as a female. And after all the rights and freedom, after obtaining all the sexual pleasure and having the pleasure of being the master, men will be rewarded with wine, food, and 72 virgins in paradise, including the wives they had on the earth. And what is the reward for the pious woman? Nothing. Nothing but the same old husband. The same man who caused her suffering while the 2 were back here on earth. It was easy for me to become an atheist. I was a student of science, so it was hard to accept that the sun moves around the earth, that the moon has its own light, and that the purpose of mountains is to support the earth so that it will not fall down somewhere. I came to suspect and be sure that the Quran was not written by someone who has at all any knowledge of the science. Not only did I read the Quran, I read the Hadith, the words of Muhammad. I found different events of Prophet Muhammad's life in which, when he had problems, Allah was able to solve them right away. For example, when he was sexually aroused after seeing his daughter-in-law, Allah sent him a message saying that he could marry her because his son was adopted and thus not his real son, so that marriage was therefore justified. Further, he created a new rule that Muslims would not be allowed to adopt any children. In my societies, I have witnessed that women are flogged. They have been stoned to death. They have been raped and then accused of permitting the rape, and the rapists have been set free. Women have been suffering from trafficking, from slavery, from all sorts of discrimination. Men have thrown acid on women's faces and then walked away as happy men. Women are not considered as human beings. For a typical couple, the most unwanted thing is a female baby. If a woman fails to conceive a male child, either she is forced into a divorce for her crime of having given birth to girls, or else she must spend her life with disgrace. I am sure you have heard many times that Islam does not support the killing of innocent people. Allah of the Holy Quran never advocates killings. The killings are the work of a few misguided individuals at the fringe of society. Islam, the real Islam, is against violence. Islam means peace. Islam means tolerance. But is this true? Does Islam really preach peace, tolerance, and nonviolence? Those Muslims who perpetrate crimes in the name of Allah think differently. They believe that what they do is a jihad or a holy war. They say that killing the non-believers is mandatory for every Muslim. They do not kill because they break the laws of Islam, but because they think this is what a true Muslim should do. Those who blow up their own bodies to kill people of different faith do so because they think they will be rewarded in paradise. They hope to be blessed by Allah, eat celestial food, drink pure wine, and enjoy sex with 72 virgins. Are they completely misguided? Let's see what the Quran really teaches. The Quran says that all those who disbelieve in Islam will be thrown into hell. They are filthy, untouchable, impure, and Muslims are ordered to fight the non-believers until no other religion except Islam is left. It prohibits a Muslim to be a friend to a non-believer, even if that non-believer is the father or the brother of that very Muslim. I'm quoting the Quran. It says that the non-believers will go to hell and will drink boiling water. It asks the Muslims to slay or crucify or cut the hands and feet of the non-believers, that they be expelled from the land with disgrace, and that they shall have great punishment in the world hereafter. The Quran says that those who invoke a god other than Allah not only should meet punishment in this world, but the penalty on the day of judgment will be doubled to them. For those who believe not in Allah and His Messenger, He has prepared for those who reject Allah a blazing fire. Not only the Quran, but also the Holy Prophet Muhammad prescribes fighting for Muslims and tells them it is good for us even if we dislike it. Then he advises them to strike off the heads of the non-believers, and after making a wide slaughter among them, carefully tie up the remaining captives. He has made the jihad mandatory and warns Muslims that unless they go for jihad, He will punish them with a grievous penalty. Allah speaks to the Prophet Muhammad and says, "O Prophet, strive hard against the non-believers and the hypocrites, and be stern against them. They will be burned in hell." He promises that in the fight for His cause, if the followers win, they will go to heaven, to the garden of paradise. There they will be given pure, beautiful, pink-colored, large-eyed virgins. It is true that Prophet said, "To you be your religion and to me my religion." This famous quote is often misused to prove that the general principle of the Quran is one of tolerance. The Prophet advised his followers to speak well of their enemies, exhorted them to be patient, and said there is no compulsion in religion. But all that changed drastically when he came to power. Then killing and slaying the non-believers was justified in innumerable verses with harshness and without mercy. The verses quoted to prove Islam's tolerance ignore many other verses that bear no trace of tolerance or forgiveness. The Prophet himself set the example of unleashing violence by invading the Jewish settlements and breaking the treaties he had signed with them and banishing some of them after confiscating their belongings, massacring others, and taking their wives and children as slaves. To his soldiers, he distributed the women captured in his raids, keeping the prettiest for himself. These are not stories, but records from authentic Islamic history and the Hadith. One can argue that these behaviors were not unknown or unusual for the conquerors and leaders of the medieval world. But these are not the activities appropriate for a peaceful saint, and certainly not of someone who claimed to be the mercy of God for all the creation. There is a conflict in the world. The conflict is between two different ideas, secularism and fundamentalism. I do not agree with those who think the conflict is between religions or between the East and the West. To me, the conflict is basically between rational, logical thinking and irrational, blind faith. To me, this is a conflict between modernity and anti-modernism, between humanism and barbarism. While some strive to go forward, others strive to go backward. This is a conflict between innovation and tradition, between those who value freedom and those who do not. I have been fighting every day against injustices and inequalities, against religious terrorism and superstitions, against bigotry and obscurantism. I have been fighting for human rights, women's rights, freedom of expression, and humanism. I do not fear to tell the truth, come what may. I will never be silenced. Thank you. Thank you so much.